have to do with this?
Look at the name of the composer, Andrew.
Oh.
Don't you know? This piece was from the Romantic movement in history.
Yeah, I see now, Mr. Lee.
You're playing without emotion, yet Romanticism is all about the expression of emotion and feelings. Meanwhile, here you are playing like a robot with rhythm and logic. Stop playing so coldly.
Wow, I didn't know that. Why don't you tell me more about Romanticism so that I can improve my playing?
Alright, if you insist. Alright, but in order to do that, we need to talk a little bit about advanced placement European history.
I don't like European history.
Well, sucks. Don't you want to win the next piano competition, Andrew?
Yeah, I do.
Then we have no choice but to go into history. Music can only be played well with a new historicist interpretation, which is the idea that music should be studied and interpreted within the context of both the history of the author and the history of the critic.
I understand.
Alright, listen up then. Romanticism was a popular art movement from the late 18th century to the late 19th century, which encompassed a wide variety of fields, such as poetry, novels, music, architecture, and the visual arts.
I see. So is that like 1770 to say 1850?
That's exactly right, Andrew. Now tell me, what else was going on during and before that time period? We need to establish some historical context.
Well, I guess the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment.
Very good.
1700s, right?
Yeah, very good. Seems like you're not entirely stupid after all.
Come to think of it, didn't the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment like make the world be all like logical and ordered?
That's exactly right, Andrew.
I see now. I remember this. The scientific revolution was the movement which introduced the idea that the world can be explained with like mathematics. See, new ideas and methods in astronomy led individuals like Copernicus and Newton and Galileo to create models of the universe based on math. Everything could be numerically ordered.
Wow, Andrew, it seems like you're very, very familiar with this topic. Why don't you elaborate a little?
Sure thing. It was Nicholas Copernicus who first introduced a math-based view of the universe with his heliocentric model, and his notion that the further the planets away from the sun, the longer the year, the longer the revolution. And then people like Kepler expanded on the view by establishing formal laws of planetary motion.
Well, what about Galileo?
And Galileo solidified the importance of a mathematically ordered world. He popularized the notion that the world is not one of qualities, but one of quantities. Things like, color and beauty and taste would be described in terms of math. This natural philosophy of his portrayed nature as just cold and rational, but purely mathematical and mechanistic. And I know Newton later created a law of gravity, which again emphasized that the universe is really again governed by mathematical laws.
Wow, it seems like you know a lot. Well, then tell me, the music of the scientific revolution, the defining genre of the 1600s and 1700s, what was it?
Is it Baroque?
Baroque and classical, that's right. Now, very good. Baroque and classical music, which lasted from the 1600s to around 1820, was very contrived, ornamental, and calculated. Play a bit of a Baroque piece for me.
All right.
As you can see, this piece is very rhythmic and very formulaic, There's a lot of mathematical order and caution. There's objectivity and balance and proportion. This is a perfect representation of the logic of the scientific revolution.
I agree.
By the way, was that Bach?
It was French Suite Number 5.
Ah, very nice, I see. Well, then there's another very famous Baroque composer and theorist named Jean-Philippe Rameau, who worked throughout the scientific revolution. He said, music is a science which should have definite rules. These rules should be drawn from an evident principle, and this principle cannot really be known to us without the aid of mathematics.
Got it. That's very scientific revolution-esque.
Indeed.
And I could tell because Bach's style and the Baroque style as a whole, has a lot of structure, But how does this relate to Romanticism exactly?
Well, from what I've told you already, what do you notice about Romanticism and the scientific revolution?
Well, Romanticism has a lot of emphasis on feelings and stuff, and science is more like logic, and those are kind of contradictions. So they are contrasting ideas.
Exactly. That's precisely correct. The Romantic movement possessed ideals that were directly opposed to the scientific revolution. Rather than orderly and mathematical worldview, Romanticism emphasized the principles of individualism, nature, and emotion. So, in this manner, the Romantic movement was actually a reaction against the scientific revolution.
Okay. Well, does that mean in a romantic piece like Chopin's Nocturne, there should be more emotion and subjectivity and balance rather than structure,
Yeah, precisely. Yeah. So, why don't you try playing the Nocturne again, but maybe play it a little more like a romantic piece?
Yes.
Wow, that sounds a lot better, Sounds a lot more like a romantic piece.
Thank you. And I'm pretty interested in European history now. It's really helped me improve. So, could you tell me a little bit more about Romanticism as a movement?
Yeah, sure thing. Okay, so as we know, the Romantic movement emphasized emotions and feelings, but they also idealized the past, especially the Middle Ages. One such example of this is the Brothers Grimm, who traveled the world collecting remnants of old folk tales and fairy tales.
I see. And are there any other themes that were common in Romanticism, Mr. Lee?
There were many. One of them was nature. Essentially, Romantic artists tried to respect the power of nature and used it to renew their spirit. Romanticists hated how the Enlightenment reduced nature to nothing more than scientific theories and mathematical concepts. And they didn't like how industrialization, a process that came out of science, disconnected us from nature. Essentially, Romanticists were anti-reason, anti-science, and anti-industrial.
Interesting. Are there any famous Romantic artists?
Certainly. Francisco de Goya was one of the most famous Romantic painters. His paintings were nationalistic and emotional, a perfect example of Romanticism. Another very famous painting was Caspar David's Friedrich Wonder Above the Mist of Fog, because it captures the emotion of the sublime.
Oh, I know that. It's a philosophical concept established by Kant about...
Shut up. Not now.
Oh, okay.
Why don't you continue playing that piece in a more romantic style?
Sure.